I'd like to call to order this meeting of the City of Menasha Board of Public Works. Clerk Galiazzi, could you please take roll call?
Alderman Keehan. Here. Alderman Zielinski. Here. Alderman Spencer. Here. Alderman Benner. Here. Alderman Nichols. Here. Alderman Krautkramer.
Here.
Alderman Collier.
Here.
Alderman Taylor has been excused.
Thank you. Our first order of business is to approve the minutes from July 18th, 2016. Do we have a motion? Alderman Keehan.
Thank you. I'll move to approve the Board of Public Work minutes from the July 18th, 2016 meeting.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. We have two communications this evening. The first one is leaf collection pilot program, and I do see Mr. Alex here. Would you like to come up and give us a little information on that too, please? Thank you.
Sure. As stated in the memo, we ran into an issue last fall where we had an engine failure on one of our leaf machines, and we have 3 of them. And our leaf machines are purely vacuum, so we suck them off of the terrace. And over the years, watching them operate, it does seem time-consuming. It seemed like we'd be on a street forever. So we were faced with with the status quo, facing an investment of either like somewhere around $25,000 plus labor to sort of remanufacture one of these skid-mounted front vacuum machines, or entertain the idea of another trailer unit to the tune of like $60,000. And there's some advantages if we decide to stay with the vacuum machines to go that route as well, or utilize existing equipment with the use of a specialty bucket, which we intended to look at purchasing anyways, because we'll be able to use that during winter months in clearing our crosswalks. And the bucket is different than you've seen a loader bucket scoop. Well, this one also collapses this way, so we can come into a pile, pick it up this way, and still empty it. So with our loader purchase this year, we also purchased that attachment. That attachment will fit on any of the 3 Volvo loaders that we have. With that in mind, I did approach our previous director, Radke, and there was some hesitation in regards to perhaps looking at this. So I reached out to the city of Appleton, to the north of us, which uses that almost exclusively, except for some of their higher volume traffic streets, and they still use the vacuum machines. So talking with Mr. Schultz over there, we got an idea of what their cost per yard is, and we started looking at our cost per yard, and there is quite a bit of difference in cost. Now, when you ask, you think, we're not sure what they all include. Some of their internal service funds might be a little different than ours as far as setup. I'd like to think not, which sort of led me to approach Director Radke once again and said, hey, maybe we should try this before we decide to invest either $25,000 or $60,000, and see if there is really some financial savings there afforded to us. Now, obviously, the concerns would be safety, placing the leaves out into the edge of the road. However, I'd like to think that by collecting the leaves in this fashion, in this manner, I think that we might be able to sort of keep a tighter schedule. So I think that the safety concerns would be minimized, and then obviously the other concern is stormwater. And again, as long as we stay on schedule, which I'd like to think that we would be able to better stay on schedule using this type of equipment and machinery, that there again too, I think we would minimize those concerns. So we're looking to take an area to test it out. The only change is where we ask the residents to place it. That would be the only thing, and granted, it'd be somewhat confusing. However, rest assured, if you drive around in the fall, oftentimes there's a number of these piles are already in the street, and rest assured that if we don't do the best job of educating, we certainly will end up collecting those leaves. We aren't going to just leave them on the terrace. But in order for us to get a good handle on our true costs, it'd be imperative for us to make sure we get the information across, get it on the terrace, and sort of see what our true cost can be in collecting these leaves. So that's what we're looking at doing.
Are there any questions for Mr. Alex? Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Alex, a couple of years ago, I asked, at budget time, I asked Director Radke, I think it was right about the time you came on, or your role changed, and I asked about getting a defined schedule for when we're doing leaf pickup. And to my knowledge, that didn't happen, and that's always a big concern because we really don't have it defined. And a concern that I have with leaves sitting out in the streets is if somebody decides to park on these leaves, catalytic converters, exhaust systems get hot. Next thing you know, we're gonna have barbecues going on, and which won't be good. We don't want cars starting on fire. Plus, there's erosion control concerns, and then still the issue of not knowing when it's going to be picked up. So, you know, to do this type of pickup, I think we have to have a scheduled pickup. And I know Appleton's schedule is different. When you spoke with them, now my mom lives in Appleton and she just tells me when her leaves have to be put out in the street and I go do it. But what's our intent as far as controlling this? Because right now it's kind of a hit and miss when you're putting your leaves out and when it's going to get picked up.
You are correct, and it's frustrating on our part when the residents call and I hear our people, just get them out there, we'll get to them. Well, I don't like that answer any better than the residents that hear it.
Or our
And-
alderman.
And what happens, like I said, you know, you're out there when everything kind of drops, so all of a sudden boom, you know, we get swamped and we're behind with these leaf machines. And like I said, I'll go out and on my way to check something out, I'll drive by and okay, they're on this end of Grove Street, 700 block, and I come back an hour later and oh my God, they're only on the 900 block of Grove Street yet with this machine, you know, with the vacuums, and it does take some time. I'm convinced that we, you know, it'd be similar to loading snow out. If you've seen our operations when we're loading snow in the parking lots with the loaders, and we can move quite a bit of snow in a short period of time. So I'd like to think that we can get a schedule and be able to hopefully stay within that schedule. Whereas right now, truth be told, if you read our newsletter too, it says just get them out there and we'll get there. And I don't like that any better than you. And I think that this is an opportunity to see, if we can do that, which I think we can, and I think that's why Appleton's costs are lower, because it's a little more effective and we'll be able to perhaps better define an area. I think Appleton has like 2 zones and then it's broken up a little bit different than, I guess, what we were envisioning, but I can look at that a little bit closer. But we were looking at kind of following our recycle routes, you know, Monday through Friday, A and a B. And if we can stay on a schedule, I'd like to think that we can by going this route. And that's what we want to try. And that's why we're selecting Monday's Zone A.
What time of days would you be considering doing this? Would you do it at night or
I know
just during the
Appleton
day?
comes in early to push them into piles and then load it out. You know, we could certainly look at doing that, come in at, you know, depending upon, we'd have to see how noisy it is, how loud it is. You can use rubber blades as well for pushing. I think Appleton has a unit sort of specifically designed. It's not a traditional loader bucket and it's not a traditional wing to create these piles. So we would be sort of experimenting, I guess, more or less. But it starts with I think, getting it out in the street to see if we can overcome our concerns in regards to that. And then I think that picking it up once we have this clam bucket, which we already have, we certainly should be able to get them in a timely manner. So.
From a savings perspective, as far as time goes, let's say our total amount of hours that we spend doing leaf collection, I don't know what that may be. What do you anticipate for a reduction from that perspective?
I'd be lying if I gave you a number right now, but I can certainly take a look at it. I have all our yard waste activities broken down. I did not bring that with me. As far as our monthly brush collection, our spring cleanup or 2 weeks, and then our, you know, it depends on man hours. See, the thing is with our vacuum machines, some of them, you know, we can run them with 2 guys when maybe we have some other activities going on early in our leaf season, but generally we'll run 3 on there, 1 raking, 1 running the hose, and then 1 driving. I'd have to get back to you on that. I apologize for not having that.
And with this communication, what was your anticipated outcome for this tonight? What was
To
your
see what kind of
expectations
feedback
from
we
this?
get from you guys. If you guys are interested, we'd like to try this. And then obviously, before we made any long-term decisions, we'd bring it back to you with what we found, our findings.
So as far as tonight goes, if everybody says, yeah, it sounds like it's positive, and
Then we'll move.
then you will move and do what?
What we will do is we will start to get our information together that we would need to get to the residents, and put that together, and be prepared for AR Fall newsletter, and then make sure that there's a supplement for those residents affected, to make sure that we get the news out to those folks.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Alderman Nichols?
Thank you. I had a few notes jotted down. I had a question about the time of day that you would do these operations, which Alderman Benner already asked, and the notification process, which you just addressed. My third question is what kind of considerations have been given to putting the leaves in the street, and also the use of equipment when it comes to our narrow streets in the city?
Obviously, over on the island, Annap Street would be one that we would obviously still use our vacuum machines. Pine Street, there again, I mean, it's going to be similar to us when we're plowing snow, so it's just a matter of pushing these leaves to a corner where we got, A, some space to maneuver, and B, piles large enough to justify using the bucket to scoop them up, so.
Would you have to suspend on-street parking for a night because of the equipment or anything like that?
I'd like to think not. In some of the literature that I've seen from other communities, Appleton, Sheboygan Falls, down in Milwaukee, there's a suburb that does it. They more or less just, again, with information, try to encourage them not to park in those streets. I guess I would envision, not like midnight, but we probably would come in early morning, especially in areas that we know around schools and whatnot, that it might, be to our benefit to do that. So.
Well, I don't think anything would be as loud as those vacuums, but
But those we never run that early in the morning either.
yeah.
But so.
Well, it would be great if you and your crews can see how those things track during the process and what adjustments could be made in the future if the decision is made to continue with this process.
Okay.
But thank you for considering it. I certainly think it's worth a try.
Okay.
And see how it goes.
Okay.
Any further questions for Mr. Alex? Alderman Benner?
I don't have a question, but
Motion.
just a little correction that I had. I think I said when I was talking about erosion control, that was a different side of me. It was actually our stormwater issue,
issues, correct.
with the leaves being out in the streets.
Correct.
And the other thing is, I think if we can, I don't think that this is the answer, the panacea to everything as far as leaf pickup in all our areas, but we'll still have our blowers, and I think this would be a good experimental
Correct.
program, especially for certain areas where our streets are big enough to be able to do this. I think it's a good approach, and certainly going to have my support to
right, thank
go
you.
forward with this. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'm just one opinion, though.
All right.
Any further discussion or opinions? I believe we could expedite the process by having a motion, and this would allow them to,
I'll make a motion to go forward with a DDMO Alex Leaf Collection Pilot Program for 8/9/16.
motion and a second. Alderman Benner?
I have a question on that, because this is a communication. It's really not an action item. Does that seem appropriate? I'd be looking to the chairman or attorney for a comment on that.
Attorney Captain, could you help me out here?
It's not a permanent change, it's a pilot program. I guess it's up to you if you want to accept it or not.
I'll accept it. Any further? Oh, go ahead. Alderman Nichols?
Here we go.
There you go.
What is your title? Superintendent?
Deputy Director of
Okay.
Municipal
Deputy Director
Operations.
Alex. Could you, I'm not sure we covered where exactly this pilot program would be taking place, so could you let everyone know for the benefit of the people
That
watching?
would be our Monday Recycle A route, which is all of Doty Island. So there would be a physical barrier. Everything south of the river is the area that we would select.
Okay,
And again, it's the idea, the intent is to sort of follow our recycle routes. So then there would be 10 routes that we're hopeful that we'll be able to actually be able to schedule and get them done within a set period of time. So that's the intent.
all right, great, thank you.
Further discussion or questions? All right, we have a motion and a second. Let's take a roll call vote, please.
Motion carried on roll call 7-0.
Our second communication this evening is proposed lane delineation changes at Racine Street and 7th Street. And I will throw this to Chief Stika to inform the public and ourselves, please.
Not that I'm the Public Works Director by any means. However,
Thank you for taking it.
yeah, I have been probably a thorn in the Public Works Director's side on this, just because, as the council knows, the last couple of years, we've really concentrated our efforts on Racine Street being one of our main corridors coming in and out of the city. And we historically have had a disproportionate amount of crashes along Racine Street. We've kind of done, it's almost like the fire triangle, where there's 3 different factors which goes into crashes. Well, and how can you change those? Enforcement's only one aspect, engineering is certainly another. What this here then, the idea or the concept going very long-term that we've kind of been throwing around as staff, and I know some elected officials have also suggested it, would be to reconfiguring Racine Street completely, perhaps with a mutual left turn lane down the middle and either a parking lane on one side and maybe bike lanes. However, doing those types of changes at this point would be pretty substantial and would really be best suited when Racine Street's scheduled for reconstruction, which won't be for a few years yet. That being said, and this is kind of one of those chicken and egg or egg and chicken kind of thing, as we were looking at some of the parking ordinances, is this the time to also look at some of the parking along Racine Street and what can we do short term or middle term here until a reconfiguration of Racine Street could be done to try to alleviate one of the issues. Any of us that have driven along Racine Street north or southbound, you know, if you catch that red light, you're going to have a few cars queued in the left lane, some of which may be going left and some of which may be going straight. Then you get cars queued up on the right-hand side, which may either be going right or straight. And then the light turns green, and then the race is on. And if all of a sudden there's a parked car a little bit further up the road, then the guy on the right tries goosing it, cutting off the person on the left, and it just ends up being a very dangerous situation. Dangerous to the fact that we've had a couple crossing guards quit that have been working the corner of Racine and 6th Street just because it has been so unsafe for them. So, in looking at this, the term or idea of this traffic diet, or this is kind of along those lines as far as how can we queue those cars a little bit better. So the proposed diagram that is on there has been drawn up, not to scale, by Public Works staff, being Engineer Montour. He's also reached out to some of his associates in other municipalities to kind of get some other opinions, and they certainly say that this type of configuration would work. And they've used the traffic templates to make sure that semi-traffic that would be turning from southbound 7th Street going to the, from southbound Racine Street onto 7th Street going to the plant would certainly be able to make the turn without taking down the light poles. As far as the impact of traffic or parking that would exist, if you're looking at the 4 corners of it, the one with the school on it itself, the northwest corner, if you remember, the school district actually had no parking when they were doing the reconstruction of the high school way further up Racine Street, and actually said that they preferred that and wouldn't have minded if we kept it. We would be looking to add an additional 60 feet onto the 75 feet, which exists by code right now there. The northeast corner, in that block, there's no parking on that side of the street anyway, so that's not impacted. On the southwest corner, that really shouldn't be impacted. There's a few spots there, but they have the parking lot with the church there, so we're really not anticipating any issues there. Then the southeast corner, the house that sits on the corner there already has no parking 75 feet through, and when you extend the first part of it, there's really no place for them to park, so I can't imagine that there'd be much of a concern there. And then the only house that we see that would be somewhat impacted, but has a large back way, and we have not observed any vehicles parking there, would be the second house south of that intersection. So I guess this is kind of for informational purposes. One of the reasons we wanted to do it now and try to get your thoughts or feelings on it, with Racine Street still being under construction, we have a much lower traffic volume. And we'd like to kind of, when that roundabout and everything is back flowing, if we've made this change and all of a sudden that's when we're going to have the regular commuters going back through that area, we'd like to kind of welcome them with the new change, not only of the roundabout, but the 9th Street reconfiguration. This would be another part of it. So that's kind of the timing of it. And the timing also, again, corresponds to the parking ordinance change that we have as an action item. So as far as how to proceed with this, I guess it's primarily for discussion at this point, and then if it's something we want to move further, I guess we'd be bringing it back at that point. No? Okay.
Excellent. Any discussion for Chief Styka?
I'm not seeing any lights.
Alderman Nichols?
Thank you. Could you tell us again, how soon would these changes be implemented?
I guess I'd have to defer to the mayor, my co-public works director.
I'm asking because school starts in a few weeks, so that's going to.
Would this have to go to council, I guess, would be the. If it wouldn't need to go to council, then the ideal would be to work with street crew, with deputy DDMO to be doing it. And one of the things that we are sensitive to, and we want to make sure that we'd probably be doing this in more of the earlier morning hours, and we'd actually commit to probably doing some police assistance with blocking out the road. I know there was some concern about some of the paint job that had been done in the past along Appleton Road. And trying to do that painting when you have cars whizzing by in a little go-kart basically can be really challenging. So we want to make sure that we give them a pretty clean road to do it before school starts and in the early morning hours to make it look good.
Okay. My main reason for asking that was because school starts soon, so that's going to increase traffic dramatically in that corridor. And then when is Racine Street scheduled to reopen?
Until like 2020? Oh, I'm sorry, to reopen fully, October.
Okay.
The 9th Street intersection will actually be opening up, 9th and Racine will be opening up in about a week, if things stay on schedule. And then the actual roundabout itself will be mid-October.
Okay. Because just 9th Street reopening will probably increase traffic on that corridor. So how does driver education work then for informing drivers of
Sure.
these changes?
There'll be some signage that will accompany the intersection. But because a number of people already, I believe, think that there's a left turn lane there, some do, some don't, I guess. Will we have people that are going straight through it? Yeah. But then we're really not going to have any different of a situation than we currently have. So people going straight in the left side of it, and then, you still have your racetrack on the right.
I'm just envisioning the racetrack being full speed ahead once that street reopens, so,
Agreed,
yeah.
agreed. So that's why if we can re-educate people as part of that whole package, that would be a good deal.
Great. Thank you.
Any further discussion or questions? Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just think it's good that we get this done, hopefully before Racine Street, or 9th and Racine actually opens up, because I think our traffic counts being down, so if we can pull that off, I think that's the right thing to do. And this is a good thing, because people do treat this like it's a 4-lane road, and it's definitely not, and it's dangerous, and this will help, I think, with that quite a bit. Thank you, Chief.
Alderman Zelinski?
Does this get a like above head sign too? Because most people don't like, as I come across, people see that turn only lane and they only see it when they actually see it on the road instead of just a sign. And there's a lot of them. I think there's like 3 in Appleton where they don't have a sign up above head and they still go straight.
Yeah, currently there is no plans with Public Works to put a sign that would be overhead, but I guess this is going to be something that we'll certainly have to monitor. And if we're seeing a bunch of violations with it, we can certainly work with them to get the appropriate signage to address it.
All right, thanks.
Sure.
Further discussion, comments, questions? Alderman,
You can call me Mr. Collier.
Mr. Collier. I want to say Arnie. Alderman Collier, thank you.
While we're on this, I think it's a great idea. I see the kids struggle to get across from 7th Street to 6th Street. The sooner this is done, the better, and if I can only add one thing, I'd love to see the speed limit drop down also, but that's another day in another place. Thank you.
Further discussion, comments? What I'm hearing is we'd like to kind of expedite this process, so I would entertain a motion. If anybody would like to get this rolling. Alderman Nichols, go
I'll make a
ahead.
motion for you.
Thank you.
I move that we move forward with the proposed lane delineation changes at Racine Street and 7th Street.
Second.
First and a second, let's take a roll call vote, please.
Motion carried on roll call 7-0.
We took some action, and now we're actually to the action items. The first action item is a payment to Northeast Asphalt for new street construction and reconstruction, concrete curb and gutter, concrete sidewalk, asphalt pavement with parking area. Let's go down to here. Contract unit number 2016-02 in the amount of $187,115.36. This is payment number 1. Who has information on this that I could throw it to? Mayor Merkes.
I can try to help you out. This is
Please help.
This is a partial payment for the work that's been done so far on our street construction projects. We are by no means finished with the projects yet, but they are moving along as scheduled, and we would expect to see them continue up throughout the summer.
Thank you very much. Any discussion, questions, comments on this payment? Seeing none, is there a motion?
I got it.
Alderman Benner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a lot of this work is out by me as well. I'll make a motion to approve the payment to Northeast Asphalt, Inc. for $187,115.36, and this is payment number 1. That's for unit contract number 2016-02.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's take a roll call vote, please.
Motion carried on roll call 7-0.
Our second action item is ordinance 0-10-16, and it's regarding restrictions on parking. Chief Stika, you're on.
All right. If anyone's ever done drywall, I hate doing drywall because every time you like go across the seam, there's a bubble or a streak or something. That's what this ordinance has been. And now it's for you guys for another skip coat that can go over the top of it and fine tune it further. There's a couple questions and things that we'll point out and ask you about towards the end of it. But kind of like the financial report, let me give you some of the highlights of what's going on. This has been pretty archaic, and there's been a lot of things in here that just didn't make any sense. There was one in here for parking for 2 consecutive hours. My favorite one that is no longer in here says the west side of Railroad Street to Taco Street from Abbey Avenue. Those that you are familiar with Railroad Street, it runs the same direction as Taco Street, and they don't even come close to one another. So what that meant, we're really not sure, but this was kind of one of those that we really had to take a look at this holistically. So going over kind of what you have here, what we ended up doing is cleaning up a lot of the language. And this was actually something that started with Director Kyle and Director Radke before their departure. They both wanted to get this done, so this has been in the works for months. And so what we have here in front of you then, kind of walking you through. Everything has just been kind of repackaged to make a little bit more sense. When you get into the no parking sections, those are all been alphabetized. Going through this, if you're looking at 10.1.22 under section F, I will point out a few of the things that have been removed just so you're aware of them. The for sale sign in a vehicle that's parked along the roadway, that has been removed at the advice of the city attorney. We have other things that can address people that are trying to sell their cars and they don't move off the road. They still have to be licensed, they still have to be there. But there's nothing saying that a person can't park their car on the side of the road and put a for sale sign while they're there during the day. The issue more comes when the car then doesn't move for a week, and that we have other ordinances that will address that. So that has been removed. Yeah, I thought I did on that one. That was section 10.1.22, letter F. Of course. No parking. A lot of those we found were in actually 2 spots in the ordinance, and now you'll see that they're all in alphabetical order. Some of the no parking zones that were removed were ones that no parking is no longer allowed, like on Anop Street, where there's the bike lanes on both sides of the street. 2 changes to point out on that one under 10.1.26. One of the new ones is both sides of River Street, which is now LLL. Old city code used to read from the fire hydrant down to the light pole, 126 feet. That was when River Street used to actually run in between the 2 buildings, the 2 plants that were there. Since River Street has been reconstructed and it no longer goes through there, we obviously don't have parking, and River Street now is a bit more narrow, and the parking lots there are good enough to handle the traffic. River Street also previously said west of the railroad tracks to the end of it, so that still covers the end of River Street the way that it had always been in the past prior to that change. To clarify on the memo that we talked about earlier, just a few lines above there, GGG, that change has not been reflected in here, so the current code is what we exist, it's the 75 feet. That's one of the ones that if you want to support that, which we already have, we're gonna have to make an amendment to this whole ordinance to change that, to add 60 feet onto that. Under the time restricted parking, few ones on there, 10.1.27. Under A5, the south side of Broad Street from Racine Street west to the alley, that was, I believe, a 15-minute parking. Or I'm sorry, it was a 30-minute parking, and we changed that just to be like other parking in the area, made it the 2-hour parking instead of having that one. One that we'll talk about a little bit more that we put in here just because we weren't sure what the council's Board of Public Works wishes would be the east and west side of the Broad Street surface lot under number 7 under that same section. I'll come back to that one in just a few moments. Other ones that we did remove were some that had a 30-minute parking. The ones that had 30-minute parking before were primarily the one I just talked about, the on Broad Street one, and then in the northeast stalls of public parking lot number 1, which is now some of the senior center lot and some of the things that have changed there, so it's just not applicable on that side of it. The 5-minute parking that used to exist, that section's been removed because that was one on Anop Street in front of the plant. And now that one hasn't been in existence for quite a while, so that was pulled out of there. Under 10.1.28, school bus loading zones, a number of those have been removed because the school district now has transitioned from having the buses parking on the street at a number of the locations to parking in the school parking lot. So the ones that they are no longer using have been pulled out of there. Under 10.1.29, there was a section in there that allowed the parking along Kakana, High, and Water Street would all terminate at 5 a.m. That was an exemption that the council made years ago to accommodate the Hungry Bull, which opened for breakfast. And with our parking, overnight parking that goes to 6 a.m., to make sure that people weren't getting a parking ticket, that was amended to 5 a.m. And little note, we generally stop doing parking enforcement at 5 a.m. anyway because there's a number of people that do go to work early. So if you want to leave your car out at 5:15, you're probably safe. Okay, and then the last one that I have for you that was an addition, and this was a request of a couple aldermen over the time that Greg and Mark and myself have been doing this, was the parking of trailers overnight on a city street. It does cause somewhat of a safety issue, especially when it's a travel trailer or a yard trailer that doesn't necessarily have the best markings on it. So 10138 is actually an addition, and that one there says basically a small trailer under 10,000 pounds or 16 feet will not be allowed to park on the public street between the hours of 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. unless it's attached to a tow vehicle. So if the person that has their boat and pulls in late at night and just wants it there till the morning until they bring it in storage, that's perfectly fine. This is more intended for that person that might leave a boat trailer or something else in there causing more of a safety issue. So, with that, going back to some of the items then that we kind of talked about, two that would not need any action. As far as the Broad Street lot, we left the north side of Broad Street in the 400 block alone. That still is 2 hour, no 2 hour restricted parking. The angle stalls are okay for all day parking, which then leads us to the Broad Street lot itself. And knowing that you have the business owners there and the influx of customers that come in and out, we listed it as being just 2 hour parking for both sides of what's on the parking structure. If that's what Board of Public Works wants, then we can leave it as is. If they wanted to designate any of the stalls, the only argument or the only discussion that we've heard would be the furthest north stalls in the parking lot, potentially to be longer term parking or exempt from the 2 hour. Would that cause more confusion with people or not? I don't know, but that's where we defer to you folks. The other one that would need no action is the trailer parking, which is the new thing that would be put in here. So without giving you too much to chomp on, I don't know if you want to maybe address those two, and then we can talk about the three that would need an amendment to this, if you would want.
Yeah, why don't we do this kind of systematically like that? Clerk, did you have the first one? I have the Broad Street lot, 2 hour parking, but there was one before that. Or?
Yeah, the Broad
Chief.
Street lot would be, if, I guess that's more for the discussion point. If you want all of the Broad Street parking lot to be 2 hour parking, then we can just leave it as is. You folks wouldn't have to do anything.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to add a little bit to Chief Styka's presentation. We, all three departments, being Public Works, Police Department, and Community Development, have looked through this extensively in some cases. And one of the reasons why we decided to put this together in a new format beyond the outdated language, etc., was because of the new ramps and the new ramp and the new lots that we've acquired in the downtown, which are now reflected in here. So from an enforcement standpoint, they are listed in our ordinance, and we can do something to enforce hours and restrictions therein. And that would be in section 10-130, which you would see the 9 ramps and then the 6 stalls next to the Marina Place parking ramp.
Alderman Nichols, go ahead. Thank you, Director Engelbert.
About the Broad Street lots, are there still is there still the possibility for parking permits there for people who live downtown? I know one or two stalls are restricted for some, or reserved for some people who live there as part of an agreement that happened years ago. So does this still allow for that?
There's no impact on those stalls. Those stalls they don't get the parking permits for those. Those are basically part of the parcels that exist, or it was kind of a quid given for a different piece of their property that was given when the Broad Street lot was originally reconfigured. This basically takes everything from the alley north to Broad Street. Those sections are the ones that are covered by this. Those other ones are their own separate agreements, some of which are Most of them are private. There's a few spots that are actually public.
And in the past, were other folks allowed to buy permits for overnight parking in the Broad
Correct.
Street lot? And that will still be allowed with this ordinance or not?
You would still be able to buy the parking permits, however, the Broad Street lot, the way that it's written, would not be allowed to be used for that purpose. The way that it reads.
Why would you buy a permit and not be able to use it?
You could use one of the other lots, Chute Street, so on and so forth.
Okay, and that's spelled out in here.
Yep. We have seen a major decrease with, obviously, the hotel being gone, where we were selling 10 to 11 permits a month.
Okay.
I think we're down to 2
Okay,
or 3, so it has really dropped off. As far as the permit parking goes, that is covered under the 10-130, and that's section D. And that's where it's now saying that the Broad Street lot, Chute Street lot, Marina lot, that's where it should be issued by permit, but then it says after that, if I recall correctly, to look back at the previous section. Throw me a lifeline, Kev, if you remember something different on that one.
No, in 10-130C1, it stipulates that
Oh,
parking
thanks.
is from 6 a.m. to 2 a.m. in the west and east Broad Street lots, South Chute Street lots. Later on, under that permit parking section, that specifies where you can use a permit to park overnight, per those four.
6 a.m. to 2 a.m.?
Yeah, so you couldn't leave your car out from 2 a.m. until 6 a.m. You could park from 6 in the morning till 2 o'clock the following. But for 4 hours, you'd need to have your car
Okay.
removed. That would prevent
Could I
you.
make a suggestion to change those times, the order of those times then, to have it read between 2 a.m. and 6?
No, because,
AM? No?
no, because then you'd only be allowing 4 hours of parking in the middle of the night.
But now we're allowing a day and 24,
No, it's 6 a.m. one morning till 2 a.m. the following morning.
wow, okay, that's a long time to park.
Well, it is in the west and east Broad Street lots. This 10-130C1, at the end of it refers to accept as provided in section 10-127A7, which stipulates that in the west Broad Street lot and the east Broad Street lot, you're limited to 2-hour parking.
I'm gonna take your word for it. I feel like I'm in a bad movie all of a sudden.
Right.
Welcome to my nightmare.
I,
2-hour limited anyway.
thank you for the clarification.
I
do
just
have-
looked that up about 10 minutes ago, so.
I do have some other questions about no parking and overnight parking, but I'm gonna hold off to see if anyone else has any other discussion about Broad Street.
Good segue. Are there any other discussion points, questions?
Well, I think I have
Mayor Marcus?
some problems. When we last spoke about this, we did speak about all-day parking in the Broad Street lot on the north side versus 2 hours on the south side, just because there are business owners down there that are there for the entire day and now they have no place to park.
Except if they're on Broad Street and the angled parking on the south side, because
Okay.
that's not covered under the 2-hour.
So there's only maybe 10, they'd have to be in those 10 stalls across the back then. Okay. It typically had been divided down the middle, and I thought that's how we had continued to do it, so I guess I'm a little surprised about that.
They can park in the upper area of the Marina Place ramp as well.
Okay, so why did we go with just 2 hours in the Broad Street lot and change what we had before then?
Well, that was one thing that Chief brought up, that is we were kind of looking towards you guys for direction tonight. However, it would be a little confusing, at least in my opinion, to do 2-hour parking in part of the parking lot and then all day unrestricted in the other half of the parking lot. In terms of circulation as well, I think sometimes, especially on the west end with the weather vane, you know, if it's a busy Sunday morning, et cetera, you could get a lot of cars staying in that west end. And if people are out walking downtown, et cetera, after they get brunch, it would be nice to get some stalls to free up if you did 2-hour parking all over.
And we looked at the number of stalls that were lost for the Monday through Friday folks that are now being pushed either into the east or west side surface lots. Splitting it down the middle, I don't know, I agree wouldn't necessarily be the best, but I guess if we were looking at that north row, I mean, we could live with that because I think some of them are doing that at this point anyway.
Additionally, on the weekends and nights, there is available the first level of the parking ramp, which would be unrestricted.
Alderman Zelinski?
Can you do some kind of a permit for them if there's business owners down there that need parking that's closer? Because I don't think they'd want to run over to those, whatever he said, eight or Mr. Mayor said about 8 parking stalls, so they can.
Yeah, they have actually been parking there. And talking to a number of them, they prefer to leave the closer stalls open for their customers. So they just want to know where to park has been their biggest thing, because they've been bouncing around to different spots during the whole construction phase. So I guess the argument really comes into is do you want more than just the angled stalls for the employees? If you want to have that first row on the north side, like to us, it really doesn't matter one way or the other. That would then afford the person that does buy the permit for the Broad Street lot to have some place to park overnight then as well, where they're not being pushed off into the other ones. So there's a couple things that you could gain by having that north road being unrestricted.
Any further comments or questions for Chief or Mr. Engelbert or the mayor? Or myself, and I won't be able to answer. Okay. Yeah, I thought you may have had some more questions.
I thought we were wrapping up Broad Street there, so I'll move on to my
Yep,
other ones.
move
Thank
on,
you.
yep. Broad
Thank
Street
you.
has been wrapped.
So with no, I'm sorry to interrupt, but so with no changes, or did you want to make an amendment to it to allow unrestricted parking in the north row? Just so we know what you folks want. Because I don't want them looking at this 20 years saying, who wrote this?
Would
Alderman
it
Nichols, go
be
ahead.
north row for both the east and
You
west
can do whichever you want.
lots?
You can do whichever you want.
Well, I'm all about being consistent.
Well, then,
Were there discussions with the business owners regarding their preference, whether it's the north side of the lot or the angled parking on Broad Street?
Not really. I think what you would be accommodating more is just making sure that they, well, where they know where to park, I think you'd be accommodating some of the people that do have a permit without having to them have to track 2 blocks to their car. You can always change it later too. If you're seeing that those spots are indeed being camped out all the time and the business owners are complaining about lack of parking for their customers, it can always be changed to a 2-hour parking later.
to kind of echo what Chief Stika said, the majority of the complaints that we'll get is just about knowing where to park. Over the course of the last year, we did have a lot of contractors and construction personnel near the downtown, and I think it was confusing more than anything. I've never gotten a complaint from a business owner not knowing or not having enough room for his employees to park. If anything, they've been more focused on their customers as to whether or not there's sufficient parking for them, if that helps at all.
Yeah, because I would think that a business owner would encourage their employees to park somewhere that doesn't interfere with their customer parking, and my fear would be that if we reserve those stalls, then we're going to have nobody using them when we could have more circulation downtown. They'll remain empty, or some of them will, not being used.
Yeah, I mean, I would, my opinion is to keep the 2-hour parking on both sides, the west side of the Broad Street lot and the east side, to encourage circulation and to keep it uniform.
Okay.
And if we do have an issue, as Chief Stika said, we can always go back and take a second look at it.
I'll step aside to see if anyone wants to offer that amendment.
Well, under that scenario, there would not
be
be
no
an amendment.
amendment.
Then it would stay as written. Yeah, there'd be no amendment, it would just stay as it's written, that Broad Street would be 2 hour.
Any further comments, questions?
I'll move on to my next part then.
Alderman Nichols, you are
Thank you.
guiding us wonderfully. Go ahead, go to your next section.
No, not today. Section 10-126, no parking. On the second page of that, so on the back side, item UU, the west side of Nassau Street. I might be wrong, but I thought parking was allowed on both sides of Nassau Street, and if I'm wrong, please correct me. Because on the next page, under section 10-129, overnight parking will be allowed on the east side of Nassau Street. Is that every night then?
Correct.
Okay,
So odd even parking is not enforced.
okay, but there is no parking on the west side.
That is correct.
Great. The next item, VV, the west side of Namath Street. I drove down there this afternoon and saw parking on both sides of Namath Street.
Yeah, that was how the existing code reads. And again, we were trying to leave things alone as much as possible. That used to be under, there's so many changes. I
I
believe
know.
TT, under the current code, the way that it exists, the west side of Namath Street. So,
So is that something we can look into between now and the next meeting? And if we need to make a change, we can do that at the council level? Okay. I just wanted to make
and is the
sure.
preference to have it removed the way
To-
that it looks right now? Or do you want signs up to have it enforced? Which,
To remove this.
to remove it from the ordinance?
Yes, because
Okay.
parking is currently allowed on both sides, I believe.
Sure.
That would be fine. And then item ZZ, both sides of Oak Street. And Oak Street, I believe, has no parking signs on the east side, but parking is allowed on the west side. So that might be another one we can
Yeah,
report back on.
and again, you would prefer to have it, how it's posted is how you would like the code to reflect.
Yes.
Fair enough.
And then that Oak Street is also recorded. Section 10-129, item D, that overnight parking will be allowed during April through October on the west side. So that's how it is currently. So those two things contradict. So we can remove the both sides of Oak Street item ZZ.
That would be, see, another one of the bubbles in the drywall.
Yeah, I know. Well, see, and I learned about drywall over the summer, but not the bubble part, just the cutting and screwdriver part. That's all I have, I think. Thank you for that.
So then the other items that we just drew attention to would be the trailer parking. If everyone's okay with leaving that in, we would leave that in code. That was a change that we wanted to highlight and bring to your attention. The other three that I have that, whichever way you want to go on it, two of them have to do with First Street. First Street from Racine Street to Appleton Street, or 120 feet east of Racine Street on Appleton Street, is currently posted as 2-hour parking during the day. That was one, that one and the library cutout were discussed at one point back in 2013. The First Street, taking the one east of Racine Street first, that one is not listed in here now, and I guess it's, the whole intent of that one initially was two of the businesses, the old DeBruin Auto Place, that people were complaining about where vehicles were being parked. Now it's been a field for the last 15 years. They would park all along Racine Street. That's one of the reasons no parking was there during the day. The other reason was the post office having a number of employees there. That was one of the spots that they parked as well. If the council doesn't want that in there anymore, those signs could come down. But those are signs that currently exist that we weren't sure if you wanted captured in code anymore.
What section is that?
On here, it's not in here, but the signs are up. That's why I'm saying we would have to have action to put it back in if you want it, because the signs exist, but it's not in the code. All these decisions tonight.
That brings me to my point. I may not. This might just be free flow of thought here. There are several constituents that are probably as confused as I am of what's being changed and where it's being changed and what's no parking. And I see that's in these 9 pages here that I have and can read. But there's also another alderman that got several calls saying, what's going on? What is this ordinance about? Am I going to be able to park here? All these kinds of things. Is there some way to take these 8 or 9 pages and do what you're doing tonight for us, which is condense it down into all 2 things that we're discussing and then another thing that we need to determine whether we're going to change or not, to get it on a memo or some sheet where not only we know what we're voting on, but the public knows what these changes are before it goes to council?
It certainly could go either way. I guess the intent that we had behind it is we got it to the point of, like I say, trying to get the bubbles now out. And these were items that we were stuck on. And to make sure that we were doing the will of what you folks wanted, that's where we were now bringing it to Board of Public Works. Whether you make your changes here and then we come back and you look at it again here, or whether you want a memo of, hey, reflecting this is what we discussed in Board of Public Works, here are now the highlighted changes, and that can accompany it going to council, is completely your discretion.
Okay, so if I said we would like a more highlighted version, bullet points, whatever, to bring back to Public Works so we can make a more educated decision based on our constituents who are probably as confused as I am, or maybe I'm more confused than they are, that might be a better road for us to go down here. Okay, Attorney Captain.
The changes are enormous. There are too many changes to actually list what the changes are, which is why what was decided was to repeal the old and recreate this new section, just because some of them, we tried to be consistent with the number of feet, you know, how it was worded, et cetera. I'm just trying to think. There can be highlights of changes, but to actually identify every single change, we can show you that version, but it would basically be the whole thing. You would just see all. You can't read it, correct. And what happened in a number of on a number of occasions is that things were just moved. So it will show a strikeout and then an underline in the new section, and that wasn't really changed, it just was moved to a different section. And other times, it was just reworded to try and be consistent with the wording, so that's a change, but it's not, substantively, it didn't really make any change. I think the changes that were articulated are the majority of the changes that people would notice, recognize, but I as far as adding new streets or taking out streets or things like that, there weren't things like that were done, other than what was articulated already this evening.
And trying to now reflect, you know, like's been pointed out, we have street signs here, but they're not in code, so do you want the street signs or do you want the code? And I guess that's where we're kind of deferring now to on these couple other little points.
Okay.
Again, whether it comes back here or goes there, we can certainly write up kind of the summation of what we discussed tonight, as well as whatever changes then you elected to make or didn't elect to make, to kind of highlight those things, so whether this gets
Okay.
approved here or goes further, we can do that.
And it's more, I mean, I have the stuff here and I can read it and have read it, but it's more clarification for a couple of people that are confused about
Oh, yeah.
the enormity of it, so.
And it has been. As I said, we've been looking at this for quite a while, so.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Nichols?
And to Alderman Kramer's question, in the past, when people have called me about a parking ticket they've received, I've advised them to appeal their parking ticket with the police department. So can you just tell people about that process and how they could do that if they found themselves in the unfortunate event of parking somewhere where they
Sure.
shouldn't
Well,
have parked?
and nothing has changed with the parking here that someone would be all of a sudden surprised they're getting a parking ticket from. But of course, it's a very simple process. You can print out the appeal form either online, or you can stop in at the police department. You give the information about the ticket and they're reviewed. And 9 out of 10 times with the first offense, if it's a person that just certainly didn't understand what the rules of the parking were, we much prefer compliance than the $5 or whatever the ticket was for that violation. So we try to make it more of an educational experience.
Thank you. And back to the First Street from Racine to Appleton
Yep.
concern, is that the narrow part of First Street?
I don't think it gets any narrower or wider from that portion on. The no parking on both sides of the street exists through the intersection, which I believe is 120 feet that it's no parking. So that way you have enough room for the left turn lane, the straight lane going westbound, and then the one right-hand lane, or the through lane going eastbound. Like you said, the question that we had on this one is not in code, but do you want it to continue in code? The signs are up.
Well, if the signs are up, it should probably just go in code.
Just leave it as is?
Yeah, put it in the code.
Okay.
The signs are there, we've let people know that's what they should do, so why change that on them now?
I guess that would be a motion.
Is it?
Not my place to
Well,
call.
I didn't
Can we
make a
go back
motion
to
for my
trailer
other
parking?
ones.
Is that
I
the
could
second
make,
one?
I could make a motion. I move that we put, the parking situation on First Street from Racine to Appleton into code.
The 2-hour no parking.
Sure.
We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion and a second. Any discussion?
May I repeat it?
Yeah,
Just to make sure
go
we
ahead.
have it correctly.
Yep. Clerk Aliazi, go ahead.
The parking situation on First Street, from Racine Street to Appleton Street, stay as is, to be put in code. Is that correct? Okay.
Alderman Benner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess I'm looking at the attorney on this one because is that, I mean, first, we don't have a motion for this here. It seems to be completely out of context from what we're doing. It seems like my thought was why this was going on was just to, if we needed an action item, was to make a motion to postpone, have them go back, make all the changes that we have, come back with one clean document, review that. If there's any amendments, one or two, you make those, and then we send it on to council. And to make a motion on this just seems to be out of the sky somewhere, because what we're talking about is the whole ordinance document and not a specific line item. And so if anything, that would have been an amendment to a motion and not a standalone motion. And I don't have a problem with what we're doing, other than I think it should just be added to the document and brought back to us in 2 weeks. And I'll leave that thought as it is.
I'm perfectly fine with that. Lost track of where we were in the
You're not the only one. Okay. I think what Alderman Benner was saying was kind of what I was trying to get at. Okay. Attorney Captain, go ahead.
I was just going to mention that that's the way that we would interpret that motion, is just to add it to what was presented today, since it was a standalone motion, and just add it to this and bring it back. That's what we would do without the main motion on the floor.
Clerk Galeazzi, help me out here. I'm gonna rewind here. First of all, what is the motion on the floor?
Well, the motion I have, as recommended by Alderman Nichols, seconded by Alderman Keehan, was the parking situation on First Street from Racine to Appleton Street stay as currently and added to the code. But currently, this is the new one. This is the new ordinance that you're talking about.
Correct.
So put down and make, okay. Maintain it's 2-hour parking. Because that's what's currently in the code.
Is currently.
It's signed, but it's not in the code.
Okay.
And so the motion was to add language to the proposed ordinance 10-10-16. How First Street is signed. No parking from Racine to Appleton.
I don't know why you're not getting it. All right, we're gonna go back to Alderman Nichols.
Thank you. In the interest of keeping things simple, I will withdraw my motion. And Alderman Keehan, will you withdraw your second? Okay. And I would just ask that that be placed in that language, as I asked for a review of the other parking situations on the other streets as well. And then we'll just come back with a new, improved, updated ordinance.
Okay, I only have 2 more for you. We'll try not to make these as painful.
Okay.
First one, first of the other ones. First Street, the library cutout, technically, is still 2 hours, no parking. However, the council took action on this back on November 4th, 2013, saying that the cutout in front of the library, or next to the library, would be removed from the 2-hour no parking. That, and it was drawn in the motion for a new ordinance to be constructed for that. Best I can tell, an ordinance was never created because that started this whole process of, boy, we should look at this, and you can tell what a process this has been. I'm assuming that's what the council still wants. If we don't, then that would be something we would re-add to this, like the other changes that we've talked about. No
Okay,
concerns?
Alderman Spencer.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on this whole issue of the signage. If I understand correctly, what we're doing is where there's a conflict where the current signage is not in the code, we're asking that the code be aligned with the signage. Is that correct? Is
Up
that-
until this last one. Because this last one still says 2 hours, no parking. Actually, we took down one of the signs, but it's not delineated as far as when. So I just want to make sure that the council still wants no restrictions to the parking along the library. And then the very, very last one that wasn't in this document, as it says in the memo, was that we would be extending the Racine Street at 7th Street 1 from 60 feet to 135 feet per the memo. It says that it was reflected in this change, in the updated ordinance, but it's not. But I'm assuming that's an okay change to make as well, because we've already talked in support of the change on Racine Street. Good? Wonderful.
All right, Alderman Nichols.
I'd like to go back to the library cutout. parking. I was on well, I happened to be on the library board at the time when this was brought forward, and also here on the council, and I remember that the library board supported this change, and the council approved it at that time as well. So I think that we should remove that sign and,
Have the code reflected to have that change.
thank you, have the code reflect the change. Thank you.
Not so bad. Think of all the time that was put in this already. This was good. Thank you for your insights to it. We will certainly make those reflections. And I guess no action would be on this, and we'll bring it back to the next Board of Public Works meeting with a memo addressing the changes that we talked about tonight, if that works for you. And then we can do it all again.
No action. I like that. Inaction. All right, that was our last action item. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.